Welcome in to Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. It's Ohio State, Western Michigan, a huge matchup. Primetime in the Horseshoe. What better way to do that than with Wendy's new saucy nugs? You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, Andy, but have you had them covered in sauce? Because Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, and they turn them all the way up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, and garlic parm. Or if you're a real heat seeker like Andy Backstrom on the other side of that screen, you can try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you, Andy. I dare you to try them. That's 7 delicious ways to enjoy the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Andy, week 2, man. Starting to get into the flow of college football season. How you doing?
Yeah, we're going to get in the flow, and then Ohio State has a bye 2 games into the season. So I guess that'll be interrupted. But I'm really excited for another great slate of college football. I thought last week was awesome. Week 0 was a little underwhelming, minus the FSU upset loss to Georgia Tech. But, hey, we got another one of those last week, and there was a ton more for college football. And Ohio State's back. So a lot of good things, and we're back again for week 2.
Yeah, we'll discuss a little bit of the schedule for Ohio State just because of the idle week in week 3. Not ideal to be idle in week 3, but that's okay. The schedule is weird because the game against Washington was obviously canceled because Washington ended up joining the league. And so now Ohio State has this pathetic non-conference schedule that they didn't really plan on having, and kind of, changes the way we have to talk about this team because of the buildup that they've got and everything like that. So we'll get into all of that later, but it's Ohio State, Western Michigan. We finally got some tape to break down from Ohio State. We finally got a game to talk about, and not just a hype machine that is out of control. So I guess we'll kick it off here, Andy. What did we learn? Like, what did you see from Ohio State that maybe you learned? We knew the defense was going to be good. We knew, the offense would start to catch its footing. We knew Jeremiah Smith was really good, but was there anything that you thought that you learned?
I think we learned that the offensive line is still not necessarily where it needs to be. Now, it could be close, but I felt like there were a lot of times last year we felt like the offensive line was one block away, or maybe it was a polling assignment that was just 1/2 second away from connecting to a linebacker in the second level. It felt like there was a lot more of that in week 1 against Akron, and you would have liked to see the offensive line dominate and run blocking a little bit more than they did. So I still think it's a wait and see for this offensive line. Now, of course, there are the injuries we mentioned with Donovan Jackson and then Cody Simon as well, but we'll stick with Donovan Jackson for the offensive line. At left guard, Austin Sareveld made his first career start as a second-year player who didn't play last year. Reminds me a little bit of Carson Hinsman, playing maybe before he's exactly ready to, but still getting some valuable snaps there for the offensive line. And so, you mentioned the idle week isn't ideal, but maybe it is for the case of this offensive line. Trying to get Donovan Jackson back to shape. We're not sure if he'll play on Saturday, but it's okay if he doesn't, because then you get the bye week and to get that starting 5 together. And now you get some more snaps for Austin Sareveld, which are really important because maybe he can be that 6th offensive lineman to either play tackle if he needs to, or guard if he needs to, or if someone goes down, maybe he can slide back in. So maybe it is ideal in that sense that you get some guys back, including Donovan Jackson.
I'm also intrigued to see if Austin Sareveld can play on the right side. If things don't look great this week with either Tegra Shabola or Carson Hinsman, if Donovan Jackson comes back after the bye week and Austin Sareveld looks good at left guard, could he play right guard? I want to know because Ryan Day made it sound like, he said Austin Sareveld is playing, quote, at starter level. Well, if he's playing at starter level, is he one of the best 5? And if he's one of the best 5, how does that work out? Because I thought Tegra looked pretty decent at times on Saturday, and I think he's going to have another good week this week. So those are the things that are on the top of my mind, that we did learn. I also learned, man, like the Arvel Reese hype is real. That's going to be my big thing that I learned about Ohio State, because, again, we knew so much about this defense, right? And with Cody Simon being out, somebody had to step up in that linebacker room, and everybody thought it was going to be Sonny Styles and C.J. Hicks. Turns out it was Sonny Styles and Arvel Reese who really stood out as difference makers for this defense. I know it was only Akron. I know it was week 1. We're obviously going to overreact to everything we see because it's the first time seeing this team in action, in months. But I didn't think that the opponent should cloud the way that Arvel Reese played, because I think that he played at a doesn't matter the opponent level on Saturday, and I think you're going to see that continue against Western Michigan. He's on a very, very steep upward trajectory, in my opinion, and what he can do for this defense is incredible. I will definitely have my eye on him on Saturday night when they host Western Michigan, and we'll see where he goes. But I'm buying the Arvel Reese hype. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I think that he's very much a guy to watch moving forward.
He seems to be ahead of schedule because he gets here last summer, immediately makes an impact, but they have him playing defensive end because there were some depth concerns at defensive end, and that linebacker room was pretty crowded last year, in addition to only starting 2 players at linebacker. So they moved him to defensive end. He got a lot of time there. And then over the offseason, they moved him back to linebacker. And, to make that adjustment back and forth to come in the summer and still make an impact on special teams as a freshman to now, being named player of the game on the defense side of the ball on a scrimmage, and then, have the outcome like he did in his first game this season. It's really impressive. And it just feels like he's maybe ahead of the curve a little bit with his progression at Ohio State, which has to be really encouraging for fans. He's just a dynamic athlete. And I think one thing that Ryan Day said this week that stuck out to me is the preparation he did off the field allowed him to play faster. I think he's probably hinting at that it was film study or film work, and just matching that up with the athleticism is always key for these players, matching up, the work outside of the Woody or, outside of the field work that they do to make sure that they're on their P's and Q's on Saturdays. And that seems like that was the case for Arvel last weekend.
Yeah, I think we're both bought in, right? Like you turn the film on from Saturday and it's like, oh, that guy moves a little different. And there's a reason that he was playing defensive line at this time last year at times and in spurts, because they like the athleticism from that spot. Well, if he can have the same impact athletically from a linebacker role, but move around like a linebacker, like you're talking about a guy who you never really know what you're going to get from him, because he can blitz. He can get to the quarterback if Ohio State asks him to. That's why they liked him at maybe that jack role that has become a myth. At this time last year, it's why they like him at linebacker. He moves sideline to sideline pretty well. I'm still curious what he looks like in coverage, to be honest. Like I think that's an area he's got to probably improve. I don't know. We haven't seen it, but like some of the tight ends he's going to go against this year are pretty good. Oregon's got a good tight end. Penn State's got a good tight end. Michigan, obviously, with Colston Loveland, like very, very good tight end. Probably their best offensive weapon overall on that roster. So like if Arvel is going to be in big games for Ohio State, I think he's got to be good in coverage. We don't really know if he is yet. And I think that's still a big unknown, but the trajectory is definitely there for him to see more playing time, especially with this 3-game ramp up. Like you're giving him a runway to really take a hold of that third linebacker role if he continues to play well alongside Cody Simon and Sonny Styles. And that's not writing off CJ Hicks, right? Like he can still improve. But Saturday, it was just more of a Arvel is standing out than it was that CJ was playing poorly. And so, that's where we're at in the linebacker room. Let's talk here, Andy. What do you, and I know we already touched on offensive line. If you want to go back there, we can, but what do you want to see the biggest improvement comes week 1 to week 2? Chip Kelly said it. You got to take that leap from week 1 to week 2. Where do you want to see this team improve the most?
I think just having a faster start in general. Slow starts were a problem for this team last year, and it just felt like, okay, when are they going to pop a fast start one of these times? And even late in the season when they played Minnesota, that was a game they started really slow. Remember, Kyle McCord took like a weird hit before halftime. Then they came out with a second half blitz. And we saw that a lot with this team. Rutgers, also late in the season, they're losing that game in the third quarter. It isn't until Jordan Hancock goes 93 yards for a pick 6 that things turn there. Maryland early in the season, also a bit of a scare. Lots of games last season where there were slow starts. A bit of a slow start last week. Will Howard starts 0-4. They go 3 and out, or 4 and out, if you will, because there's a false start penalty by Jeremiah Smith on that 3rd and 1 that makes it a 3rd and 6. They don't convert. They go 3 and out. They punt. They score eventually on their next drive, but you'd still like to see Ohio State against a MAC opponent coming out, scoring consecutive drives, having a fast start. And that was a big this week for Chip Kelly and also for Will Howard, because Chip Kelly said, everyone gets settled when Will Howard gets settled. And Will Howard embraced that responsibility. He knows he needs to be better. He started 6 of 16 passing and finished 11 of 12, so 17 of 28 on the day. I think he wants to be a lot closer to that second category than the first one. And again, some drops affected some of the rhythm and consistency of that first set of data, but still he knows he can be better. There were some throws he did miss in that first part of the game. I know he wants to tuck the ball and run in some situations where he threw it away. So I'm curious to see how fast Ohio State can start against Western Michigan, because you want to be having like a 20-point lead by the end of the first quarter or midway through the second. And last week against Akron, you only had 17 points at halftime.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually thought Chip Kelly's opening drive script was pretty good. There should have been a 60-yard touchdown pass on the second play of the game. 3rd and 1, Ohio State, I feel confident, would have probably maybe went for it on 4th and 1. I know it looked like it got stuffed, but it looked disorganized anyway. And then 3rd and 6, you have an incomplete pass. So, I didn't think the script was terrible from Chip Kelly, but he said that he didn't have a good enough game script because Ryan Day applauded him ad nauseum Saturday right after the game. I thought Chip called a great game. And maybe that was Ryan just trying to reinforce in his head, yes, I made the right decision giving up these play calls.
Right.
But I thought that the script wasn't bad, because if Jeremiah Smith catches that ball and goes 60 yards for a touchdown on the second play of the game, we're like, oh man, Chip Kelly's cooking. And instead it's like, 4, like you said, 4 and out. And, you get 3rd and 6 from almost midfield and you don't convert, then you punt and you look like an idiot. So, that's interesting to me that they want such a much faster start, when in reality, they had one, they just didn't execute. And I think that's where Chip Kelly gets caught up there, is we need to execute better. As a play caller, I need to execute better. As a team, we just have to execute better. And, there's some merit to that. But I also think that maybe Chip was a little too hard on himself with that start, because if that touchdown is caught, it's a completely different conversation we're having. Your second play ever, as the Ohio State play caller, you drew up a touchdown pass to the true freshman superstar.
Yeah, but that's just the first drive, right? They punted
yeah.
in that time in the first half. They didn't score on their final drive of the half. They also turned the ball over on downs deep in Akron territory. And then when Denzel Burke had his interception, they went 11 yards in 5 plays and had to kick a field goal. So, it's the whole first half for me where I think you'd want to see more explosion, more conversion in general, and taking those opportunities that maybe your defense gives you and capitalizing like they did in the second half.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not arguing with you at all. I just think that it's interesting. The conversation probably shifts a little bit,
Yes.
Then you can probably excuse one of those 2 punts.
Right.
You can excuse a field goal drive on 11 yards in 5 plays if the second play of the game was a touchdown. You're probably feeling a little better heading into the locker room at 24-3.
Yes.
But you didn't. And so you got to execute better. And I think that's a good message. It's about execution. It's about Ohio State. It's not about the opponent, which is good. I'm going to go biggest improvement. I want to see better play from the twos. I know that that's way in the weeds, but Ryan Day said he wants these guys actually playing football. And, a couple incompletions there in the fourth quarter from Devin Brown. I want to see him be more consistent if he's going to be that quarterback too. He's 1 play away. I want to see him make that throw on the sideline to Jaden Ballard. I want to see the offensive line block up better. The twos. We've heard that this unit feels like it's got more depth. I want to see that blocked up better. I want to see James Peoples not put the ball on the turf. I know that there's a lot of nerves that go in, especially with the twos. There's some freshmen out there. There's some young guys out there who are trying to earn their keep. But I think it's got to look better than it did on Saturday. And that is, again, way nitpicky. But if we're not talking about the fast start, the defense was fantastic. And the offense finally figured it out after the slow start. And you already took the slow start. So I got to find something that I want them to improve on. So I'm going to go with, I just want to see clean play from the twos. Devin Brown, you were almost the starter. Show me something that gives you some confidence that if Will Howard goes down, you're going to be the guy to take over. Jaden Ballard, you want on the field with the ones, I just think that you can see more from the second team offense. And Ryan Day, I think, is challenging that unit. He's talking about, hey, we got metrics to meet. We got a playoff committee to impress. I've never heard him say that out loud, but he understands what's at stake in the fourth quarter of a 50-point game. So if Ryan Day is preaching it, then I'm going to beat the drum for it too. Twos, I want to see you more sharp. And I think that, this team will feel a lot better about its depth on offense if the twos look more sharp.
Yeah, and you're playing a cupcake schedule, so you have to beat these teams really badly. You can't get away with even like a 30-10 win like Michigan had against Fresno State, which is not the same caliber of opponent, but you get my point. Like you
Yeah.
need to have decisive victories at this point in the season, especially when you're playing back-to-back MAC opponents, when you have a team like Marshall on the schedule, which isn't, as much of a gimme game as the first two maybe, but still a game you should win by 30, 40 points. And you got to make it decisive and get those style points that, we talked about a ton in the BCS era was all about that kind of stuff. How much are you winning by? What's the margin of victory? So I agree with you. I also think that, maybe with a faster start, those twos get more time. Like Devin Brown, yes, they didn't score a touchdown on really his one drive that he was in there. The second drive was just a kneel down. But like that's only 2 drives for Devin Brown, who came into the season with 28 career pass attempts. Yes, he's got to make the most of the opportunities he does have. And I did feel like he missed 2 throws there. The one downfield, Jaden Ballard, and the other one, as you mentioned, was on that out route that was too far wide. But I think they also need to give him some more time, a couple more drives in a game. And if you get the fast start you're looking for against Western Michigan and you're up 40 by the end of the third quarter, he should play the full fourth quarter. I mean, there's just no reason to keep playing Will Howard at that point. And you should give Devin Brown more time.
I'll go a little bit further. He should play the third quarter. Like Ohio State, go out and kick Western Michigan's tail in the first half. If you're a leave no doubt team, go out there and do it. That way you can get the second string quarterback the third quarter. And guess what happens in the fourth quarter? You can play one of your freshmen. You can play Lincoln Keenholz if he needs those reps. Like Will Howard's not going to be here forever. And so and you're not going to play Julian Sayin against Big Ten teams because you might be in a couple of close games there. So the opportunities already are, it's one less opportunity, in your cupcake schedule that you're in right now to play these freshmen. So you need to be able to get them reps. And the ones, if they take care of business, Devin Brown should be able to play the third quarter. And then you can see how it's going and give Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keenholz the fourth quarter. It's I want to see that. And if the second play of the game was a touchdown, it sparks the offense, they do better and blow Akron out. And then we get to that point where Devin Brown's playing the third quarter and we get to see a third quarterback in the fourth quarter. But I never at one point thought that there was room for a third quarterback to be on the field on Saturday because I think Devin Brown still needs those reps as QB2 if he's going to be QB2. So, yeah, it is a trickle-down effect from the first team. They weren't good enough in the first half, which made it to where Devin Brown only got that one legitimate drive. And again, this is nitpicking, but also look at the schedule, folks. We have to nitpick because if you're not nitpicking, then, you're going to, bash your head against a wall trying to talk about the little things that you can do with the ones that can improve.
Well, I think it's interesting because what do you do, right? So let's say you put Devin Brown in the third quarter because you have such a big halftime lead or something, and he doesn't play well enough in the third quarter for you to be satisfied. Do you continue to play him into the fourth quarter because he needs that work? Or do you say, okay, let's open up this competition a little bit because it's always competition and play someone else, whether it's Lincoln Keenholz, whether it's Julian Sayin, Aaron Owen, whatever, to compete for QB2? And I don't know, is that competition just in practice and then you get the reps you do in the game? Is it made mid-game? We don't like as much what we're seeing from Devin right now after that third quarter. Do we move to someone else? I hope Ryan Day would balance that in that situation. But again, like you said, it's up to the first team offense to really get things done, or else this is all meaningless conversation. It won't even come to that like it was against Akron. But I kind of agree with you. I think it was a missed opportunity last weekend to get those guys in. Devin Brown played, but he threw 3 passes. That doesn't give you a ton of data. He didn't have time to really get into a rhythm. Yeah, they threw the ball downfield a couple times, but I don't think you can really gather much from that, or I don't think he gained a ton of experience from that. I'd like to see him get consecutive drives, get more data. Even the Cotton Bowl, he had a couple, maybe 3 series that he played when he was healthy.
Yeah.
They just need more data because you got to figure out who your backup quarterback is. This is a long season, as we've said, nonstop. They need to have a better picture of that. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so that's my improvement. I want to see more from the twos. What we did see, though, from the twos was a true freshman making an impact. Edric Houston having that tip pass that led to a Gabe Powers touchdown. We saw Jeremiah Smith, obviously. We saw good play from James Peoples at times. We saw a couple carries from Sam Williams-Dixon. Saw a couple other freshmen get in the mix. Andy, it's freshman time. We're going to talk about him. Which freshman, after the Akron game, now we're heading into week 2, which freshman do you want to see at all? Which freshman do you want to see more from based on what you saw on Saturday? Like, where do you want to see this, or who do you want to see from the freshman class that maybe we didn't get to see, or maybe you just want to see more of on Saturday against Western Michigan after watching the game against Akron?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the secondary. We saw Jalen McLean pretty much right away on special teams, which was not a surprise because as we've been reporting through training camp and really all summer, this guy has been bursting with potential and exceeding his 3-star recruiting rankings. So that wasn't I wouldn't be surprised also to see if he makes more of an impact on the defensive side of things in week 2 against Western Michigan. He's someone that comes up for me, as well as Aaron Scott Jr., who was in there on that series with the 2s or the 3s, kind of a hybrid mix of those guys, when Edric Houston had his pass deflection with his helmet that led to the Gabe Powers touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Scott makes somewhat of an impact in week 2 as well. He was another big spring game performer, just like Jalen McLean, just like Edric Houston. Those are the 2 guys in the secondary I'm going to be watching for in week 2. Jalen McLean at safety and Aaron Scott Jr. at cornerback.
Wow. Took 2. Took my guy. Took the one I was going to talk about.
Oh, wow.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, Andy. Yeah. Okay. I really want to see more from James Peoples. Great teaching moment on Saturday, man. 5 carries, gets a touchdown. 6th carry, balls out, and he jumps right on it. It didn't cause a turnover, which would have made Ohio State only win the turnover battle by 2, which technically they had a turnover on downs, but I don't. Do we count that?
No.
Okay. Well, then it's settled. We don't. But you cannot put the ball on the turf, and I think Saturday was a great teaching moment for him because it happened in the lowest stakes environment possible. It happened very, very late in the game where very few people were watching, but one person who was watching, Andy, was Carlos Loughlin. And James Peoples was greeted on the sidelines by Locke. And I just, man, to hear that conversation, I would love to get some insight on what was said there because it did not look pleasant. But I think, again, that is the best teaching moment. He didn't fumble in the 3rd quarter against Michigan State. He didn't fumble, in the 2nd quarter against Indiana. He fumbled in the 4th quarter late against Akron. And so I want to see a bounce back effort from James Peoples. He has all the talent that you could imagine. He reminds me so much of J.K. Dobbins, and I've said it on this show, I think even. He reminds me a little bit of Blake Corum in just the way that he runs. A very, very special Big Ten running back in the making here. And maybe we'll look back and say, hey, that first game ever when he had that touchdown, but also that fumble, really taught him a lot of things. And so I want to see how he bounces back. I think he's going to get a lot of work in this game because, again, I think that the 2s are going to be in for most of the second half. But how does he respond? How does he, pick himself back up after a miscue? I'm very anxious to see what James Peoples does this week.
Yeah, I think he hits 6 carries, 30 yards, touchdown. In that moment, I guess. The running backs in general, I'm really going to be keying in on and see the production of them. Chip Kelly talked this week about wanting just upping the totals of carries for both Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. I think Quinshon had 13 carries. Travion had 8 carries. Travion averaged 8.1 yards per carry. I think Quinshon was hovering around that 4 yards per carry mark. And so you would like to see a little bit more efficiency on the Quinshon runs. Of course, that's not all on him. It's partly, influenced by the blocking that he's getting on his plays. But I think that's just something that we're going to be watching the entire season, kind of the seesawing of those 2 running backs, how they rotate them in. It felt like it was drive to drive at times early in the game last week against Akron. And then it felt like there was times in the second half where they were mixed in both on the same drive. And I thought that was pretty cool, just having that 1-2 punch mid-drive. That was actually the James Peoples touchdown drive. There was like a 21-yard run by Travion Henderson. Then there was a 3rd down conversion by Quinshon Judkins, and then James Peoples scored a touchdown later that drive. So using all three on one drive is interesting as well. So that's up to Carlos Loughlin. Like he's rotating those guys in. And Chip Kelly said, like he doesn't change the way he calls the game, regardless of those three guys, whoever's in the game. So I think, watching those carry counts is going to be something that we do week to week, just by virtue of this split and the stars that they have in the backfield. But I thought it was pretty good week one. It could be better though. And if you pop one big run, of course, it's going to look better on the stat sheet.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other freshman that we have to talk about, obviously, Jeremiah. We don't really consider him a freshman. We don't really put him in this category. But I thought it was insightful I think it was Ryan Day on Wednesday night was talking about, now you have to prepare after a game. And it's a midweek preparation. It's not a first game of the year. You have 9 months to prepare. It's a midweek preparation. You got to get back in the weight room when you're sore. You got to, study film a little bit quicker than you did because you only got 1 week to prepare. You've got to, install. You only get to run this certain plays 4 or 5 times before you have to run it in a game and execute it to perfection. These are all things that we've seen from freshmen before where they have a harder time executing in season than in camp because it is much different to have a game week preparation mid-season than to have, camp preparation. I want to see how Jeremiah Smith does in a shortened, preparation window and just see, okay, this guy is a true veteran, or should we still consider him to be a freshman? I'm a little curious there. I think he's going to have a great game on Saturday. I don't think there's anybody who can cover him, maybe in college football, let alone, in the Western Michigan secondary. But I just want to see. I'm curious because Ryan Day talking about that is, a little bit of a challenge. I thought, hey, Jeremiah, we want to see you prepare, midweek through the season like this. And I think that that's something to watch in week 2.
This is no shade to any of the other receivers on Ohio State, but I think that Jeremiah Smith is wide receiver 1. And I don't know how much that matters because I think the top 3 are all really good. They could all have 1,000 yards receiving, depending on the way this offense goes and how many games they play. But I do think that the situations in which Jeremiah was throwing the ball in week 1 against Akron, it almost didn't matter the opponent, didn't matter the coverage. If it was one-on-one, they were going to Jeremiah Smith. We saw that last year and the year before that with Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's kind of similar in the way that you just get the sense that this continues for Jeremiah Smith. It's going to dictate defenses. You're going to have to double team him, going to bring a safety down, which is going to help with numbers, with other receivers. That would mean that Emeka Egbuka or Carnell Tate would be in single coverage, and that gives them opportunities as well. It's also going to give you better opportunities. There's all sorts of things that you can get from that kind of dynamic. And maybe it feels too early to say this, but the way he played and the kind of catches he made, the contested catches, the downfield ability of Jeremiah Smith, I don't know, for me, that was enough already to be I think he's the top wide receiver on this team just because of what he can do and the way he can influence defenses. I don't think that gap is huge between the other 2 guys. I think Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate are both going to play in the NFL a pretty long time. But I just think that top trio is really good. And maybe Jeremiah Smith isn't number 3. Maybe he's number 1. And I think that was kind of one of my takeaways after the game.
Andy, do you know what Ohio State has a new number 1 receiver, maybe? You know what my new number 1 is? The Wendy's Saucy Nugs. You've had Wendy's Nugs dipped in sauce. I'm going to ask you again, Andy, have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new spicy nugs, take the crispy and spicy nugs you love, and they turn them all the way up to 11. You can choose between flavors. Andy, there are flavors. Buffalo. You like buffalo? Buffalo. Honey barbecue, garlic parm. I'm a honey barbecue guy myself. Not really a fan of spice, but a little bit of spice. If I get the spicy nugs with the honey barbecue, I think I could do that. But I'm not really a spicy guy. And if there is spice, I like ranch. Wendy's has good ranch too. If you're a real heat seeker, though, choose spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you to try them because I'll need a gallon of milk for that. All that to say is there's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before for a whole new way to nug. It's got to be Wendy's. At participating U.S. Wendy's, they're my new number 1. Andy. And the new number one target for Ohio State is Jeremiah Smith, potentially. The new number one target for the Ohio State roster is Western Michigan, because that, one day at a time, as the coaching staff will tell you, we're going to break down a little bit of the Broncos, not too much, maybe 5-10 minutes on the Broncos. I think we're going to do the weekly segment here. What scares you? Because we talked about like what scares you about Akron last week, and it kind of came true. I thought Nunnally and the front seven had a pretty good game, considering the opponent, considering the challenge that they were up against. You were spot on there. I was impressed. You did your homework. It paid off. So Andy, I ask, what scares you about Western Michigan?
Yeah, I think their best player on offense is their running back, Jalen Buckley. He had more than 1,000 yards rushing last year. But also, I'm kind of concerned a little bit with the linebackers and coverage. We talked about it a little bit already with CJ Hicks. Last week, he was targeted 5 times, gave up 4 receptions, 23 yards receiving, given up. Jalen Buckley is pretty dynamic. He wasn't necessarily like an eye-popping receiver last year, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield. And with teams not wanting to hold the ball that long against this Ohio State defensive line, I think you're going to keep seeing opponents try to throw quickly and use the quick game and maybe expose the flat a little bit. And so I'm wondering if someone like Jalen Buckley can get some chunk yards and maybe on an early drive or two, move the ball that way for Western Michigan to get some points on the board for the Broncos. And then I'm looking at those linebackers, right? Whether it's CJ Hicks, whether it's Sonny Styles, whether it's Arvel Reese, at that will spot, like how are they doing on that weak side covering the flat against a running back like Jalen Buckley? I think that was kind of my first takeaway when looking at Western Michigan.
Yeah, I really like that. I watched a lot of this Western Michigan Wisconsin game. 2 guys stood out. Jalen Buckley, absolutely. Good player. Probably could be an all-MAC player. And if you're in the MAC in general, all-MAC though, like if you're on the all-MAC team, you can play in the NFL because most guys on the all-MAC team at least make a roster. So or get a camp invite. So that's an interesting thing for me. I think Jalen Buckley is a great call. He had 88 total yards against a decent Wisconsin defense last week. Had a 24-yard reception out of the backfield, 64 yards. He was effective in the run game. His name came up a lot against the Wisconsin defense. And I don't think that this is quite like the Wisconsin defense of yore. I think Wisconsin's looking for a little more from its defense, but also hat tip to Jalen Buckley for doing that against a team that's still pretty physical overall. And Luke Fickell's going to have a physical outfit. And I thought Buckley handled himself well. I am curious, after taking a little bit of a beating, just, a standard wear and tear against a Big Ten opponent, coming into the second straight Big Ten game for Jalen Buckley, how does he fare? And then the offensive line the same way. You thought Wisconsin kind of leaned on you a little bit, took over that game. Now you got to do it for a second straight week against an Ohio State defensive line that I promise is much better than Wisconsin. So, I'm a little curious there. And if Jalen Buckley has a second straight game like he did last week, I will really be impressed because it'll be against a better defense and it'll be after a week of that wear and tear I'm talking about. I'll go what scares me, Andy. I'll go to the other side of the ball. Bilal Cohn had 10 tackles, a tackle for loss, and 2 pass breakups. He was pretty good. Tate Halleck, their safety, 6 tackles, 4 of them solo, half a tackle for loss, 1 pass breakup. They had 6 pass breakups against Wisconsin. I don't think Tyler Van Dyke is great, but 6 pass breakups in a MAC versus Big Ten game is kind of interesting to me. It's kind of eye-popping. I think this secondary is decent. I think one of their linebackers had a couple pass breakups. They were kind of flying all over the place, not letting Wisconsin really throw on them as effectively as maybe you'd like to see if you're the Wisconsin passing attack. Wisconsin had 192 passing yards. And again, I'm not crazy about this Wisconsin passing attack. Will Pauling is pretty good, but I don't know if there's much after that. I'm just curious. What scares me a little bit is if you get an inaccurate ball, I think I know Jeremiah Smith is 90-10 on 50-50 balls. I know that Ohio State should make some contested catches, but I think they're going to at least contest passes from Will Howard. And I think that's something to watch for. So that's what scares me. I don't know if it's what scares me, but it's got my attention because I don't think anything truly scares us in these first few matchups. But it's definitely got my attention that they were that effective in the secondary against Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think, look, this defense returned a ton of starts from last year, which isn't always a good thing, as we've talked about before on these kinds of shows. But I do think with a new defensive coordinator, Scott Power, Chip Kelly was talking about it this week, they changed things up. They're more of like a 3-3 stack defense right now. And I think anytime you change things up for a team like Wisconsin to open the season, you don't really know what to expect. And I think that was partly influencing the fact that that was a close game. And that, aside from a fluky special teams play like that, Western Michigan could have been in position to win that game and upset Wisconsin week 1, which is crazy to think about, but maybe not that crazy because Western Michigan for a lot of years has been a pretty good power in the MAC. And it was just last year, 4-8 season was pretty uncharacteristic for that kind of program. So not surprised if they bounce back this year. I don't think that bounce back necessarily happens in week 2 at Ohio State, but the defense certainly, played its part last week. I agree that the secondary is definitely improved. And again, some of that just comes with that experience. I agree that Balakon, he was targeted 4 times, didn't give up a catch in that game. But again, as you mentioned, the Wisconsin receivers and the Ohio State receivers, 2 different categories there. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to look. And I do think it's still going to be a test for this Ohio State offensive line, every week until they get it. And even when they do, it's going to be kind of okay, can they do it again? When we talk about that with individual guys, last year, I know with Josh Proctor, he proved himself week 1. And we're okay, well, what about again? And then, later in the season, he would do it again. We're all right, well, we don't really know. It's from a group standpoint, it's the same thing with this offensive line. Even when they do it, it's still going to be okay, well, can they do it again? And they still have to do it first in the run blocking department for me. So even against this Western Michigan defense, I'm going to be watching to see if there's wins in those matchups, one-on-one and pass rush situations, but also collectively as a group, how are they pulling? Are they connecting? Are they connecting on those blocks that would turn a 10-yard run into a 50-yard run? I think that is on the board for me.
As we move forward here, I got a question for you, Andy. How much do you hate the idle week next week?
I mean, I don't like it for Ohio State. I think it would be much better later in the year. But I also, like I said earlier, they need these guys back healthy. Cody Simon is the heartbeat of this defense. And he's the one with the helmet comms. And he's your middle linebacker. He wears number 0 as the block O. And you want him on the field. And to not want to have to rush him back, this is helpful to have the idle week to make sure he's fully healthy. Same thing goes for Donovan Jackson. You want your best 5 playing offensive line, and you want that continuity. And if this off week gives you more time to rest Donovan Jackson and get you comfortable with playing him in their 3rd game of the year against Marshall, then that's great. So, maybe when you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year, I don't love that they only have 2 games before their first bye week. But at this point of the year, knowing the injuries they have to 2 very critical starters, I mean, their most important defensive player, arguably, considering he's the quarterback of the defense, and then an offensive lineman who has all-American potential, I don't think it's that badly positioned after all.
Let me give you a major counter-argument here. Do you know who else is on the idle week next week?
Shoot, I don't know.
Marshall. Play the game next week, and you both can have the week off.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if 2 is a trend. I think 3 is a trend. I want to see trends with this Ohio State team. And if we could have gotten 3 games in before we get to the idle week where we have to obviously fill content because that's our jobs, but also we get to talk about this team. I want to see 3 games of a good sample size, because they're going to try to correct a lot of things. They're going to put some new things in. They're going to do some things differently in week 2 that they did in week 1. But that doesn't mean that everything is that's what the trend is for this team. Whereas 3 weeks in, okay, after week 1, you got comfortable, you put some new stuff in. Then the 3rd week, you really learn a lot about your team, because it's not just taking the leap from week 1 to week 2. It's really starting to establish who you are as a team. Instead, it's okay, play the opener and get a feel for everything. Make the changes in week 2, then sit around for 2 weeks. Then you get to show it in week 3, in the 3rd game of the year. I just want a 3rd game. And I know that this is all moot because it doesn't matter. Marshall's not coming to Ohio Stadium. They'll both be on the bye. They'll both sit around and watch football day on Saturday and get their work in instead of playing. But like, and I also understand it from Marshall's point of view. They're going to Virginia Tech this week, and then they want the rest, so they're not just playing Virginia Tech, Ohio State back to back like Akron is this week, going from Ohio State to Rutgers, and like Western Michigan is going from Wisconsin to Ohio State. Like, you don't want to get beat up if you're one of these G5 schools when you're collecting your paychecks earlier in the year. I get it. But also, Ohio State, just play the third game, and then you can have your off week and go into Big Ten play. That's all I ask.
Well, you're going to get your first taste of how this team responds to an off week, and you have a pretty big off week coming up later in the fall when they go to Oregon and play in Eugene on October 12th, and then you got an off week after that. So I do think that you're going to get a little bit of a glimpse of how this team responds coming off of a bye week, which is always important. You know, you want to win a game, obviously, but you also want to play really clean, have a fast start, execute well. You want your script to be, pretty darn good coming off that extra week of preparation. So I think that'll be a good test run for this team. I mean, look, if you look at the schedule, at least going into the year, you think the most logical time for them to drop a game, if they are to lose a game, would be at Oregon on October 12th. It's going to be a huge spot if they do lose that game to bounce back, after a bye week. So maybe it's good to have a test run of a bye week, not to prepare to lose, obviously, at any time, but just to know how you would respond to have the off week, how you would approach that, what you need to do to be on your A game, and how to, come back the next week, win or lose, stronger than you were before. So, I don't know. That's maybe not the strongest counter argument, but it is a point to be made with the schedule. By the way, just on the Oregon point, I mean, maybe they aren't as intimidating. That's a week one overreaction for you, but who knows, man? And that's the thing with the schedule. Maybe the Iowa game is more intimidating. Who knows, right? And that's where we just need more data on these teams. Maybe Oregon will score 50 on Boise State this week. I don't know if that will say that much because Boise State gave up a ton of points in week one as well. I think they're playing Georgia Southern. So who knows? But again, we need more data on these teams. But I guess my long-winded point was that it's not that bad to have a bye week, at least a test run, when a season you have 2 bye weeks.
The last time Ohio State had 2 bye weeks was the fabled 2019 season, where they should have beaten Clemson and played LSU for the national championship. Those bye weeks came on October 12th, which this year is going to be when Ohio State plays Oregon, because the thing about it is the first game of the year was on August 31st, just like this year. It's the exact same Saturday schedule. So the bye weeks during that season, which just as a frame of reference, it doesn't really matter, but it's interesting to look back at. The bye weeks that year were October 12th. They played Michigan State on the 5th, then had the 12th off, then went to Ryan Field against Northwestern and spanked Northwestern on October 18th in a Friday night game. And then they had it November 2nd off between the Wisconsin game where they won 38-7 and Maryland, which they won 73-14. They had November 2nd off. This year they will play Penn State. So the 2 idle weeks they had the last time this schedule looked this way with 2 idle weeks, they play instead of having the off weeks in those weeks, they play Oregon and Penn State. It's kind of crazy how that works out. This year, the idle weeks are, sandwiched between Marshall and Michigan State, and then sandwiched between Oregon and maybe a good Nebraska team. We don't really know yet. We'll see more about Nebraska this week. I just think the 2 idle weeks I really like. I'm just not sure how much I like them where they fall for Ohio State this year. How advantageous is that first one for them? You can kind of use it as a true preseason with these 2 games, and then Marshall is like your season opener. And I do feel like Ohio State will use it that way. I think we'll get a little bit more of that preseason feel, because I did think Saturday did feel a little preseason-y, if you will. Do you agree with that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it did in a certain sense, but also Will Howard played into the fourth quarter. So yeah. I didn't in that sense. I think in an ideal world, Will Howard would have been out of that game at some point in the third quarter. I don't think they had seen enough from the offense. Think about it. Yeah, they scored 35 points in the second half or whatever, but 14 of those points was defensive touchdowns. So they still won that last touchdown from Will Howard to Carnell Tate. And I think they're like, okay, we feel good about the situation here. So I don't think it was in that sense, the guys were out super early. But I do get the feeling, later in the game where it was okay, now we got time to put the 2s in defensively, especially. But maybe it will be more the case this week against Western Michigan, because it's an opportunity to do that. And I think that's actually a really good way of looking at it. Like, these are their 2 preseason games, and then you get the bye. And then you have that's kind of like the way the NFL works, right? Like, you do your preseason, you get the week off. It's actually a couple weeks, it feels like nowadays, with 3 preseason games, and then you break into the season.
Yeah, shout out to the start of the NFL season. This is actually the NFL pregame show for Chiefs Ravens. So thanks for being here. We're definitely talking Chiefs Ravens at the end of this. We're not talking Chiefs Ravens because we don't care about Chiefs Ravens. Are there any Buckeyes in Chiefs Ravens? Malik Harrison, is he still with the Ravens? I don't know. I don't know if there's any Ohio State
Dobbins, but he's in LA now with the Chargers.
Yeah. Week 1 is a disaster for me in the NFL because I'm so locked in on the start of Ohio State football season. And like, I just forget where all the free agents went. So it was nice. I did the Ohio State, the post for lettermenrow.com of like where Ohio State guys made the rosters. And so it's like, oh, okay. Like, this guy's here now. This guy's here now. Jonathan Hankins is on like his 5th team now. Like, he's still in the league. That's crazy. Cam Hayward's still a captain for the Steelers. I know that one because, I'm a Steelers fan. Justin Fields, obviously, with the Steelers. But some of the free agent stuff with the NFL and Ohio State just kind of trips me up a little bit. I don't know if there's any. We'll have to check that out.
I think it's Blake Harrison. I think Blake Harrison's the only one.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks.
Only active is the Ravens, so no Chiefs.
There you go. Make sure to watch the lone Ohio State Buckeye playing on the opener in Chiefs Ravens. That'll be fun to watch Malik in action. I'll actually be locked in on it right after we're done here. I'm going to go eat some dinner and then lock in on Chiefs Ravens. We're not talking about that, though. We're talking Ohio State, Western Michigan, the main event on Saturday night at 7:30 inside the Horseshoe, primetime on Big Ten Network. Andy, what's your score pick? We're starting to give them out here. We got the Friday show, the bold prediction show, where we give out bold prediction, offensive player of the game, defensive player of the game, final score. Tim Mays, the 41-year vet, his gets held until Friday for all of you people, so you can go watch that and get his expert analysis. He makes some analogies in there that are just absolutely wild. You're not going to want to miss Tim's performance in the bold prediction show on Friday morning. I promise. It'll be worth the price of admission, which is free. Andy, what's your score pick, man?
Yeah, I think they're going to hit 52 points again, which, is that going to happen? Who knows? But I'm picking 52-9. I believe there'll be some weird missed extra point, blocked extra point. I don't know. I say that Western Michigan does get 1 touchdown. I don't think that's going to be satisfactory for the defense, but hey, that's okay. Like, they're not going to be perfect this year. I know you feel differently about this game and the way it's going to go, but I say 52-9 for Ohio State. And I also think that some of those points will come from the second team offense. I do believe that this will be a game that Ohio State is out comfortably, and we see more of those reserve players than we did in week 1.
Interesting. Yeah, 52-9. I like that. I picked 52-3 last week, and that second field goal was like a real gut punch for me, especially when Gabe Powers is trotting into the end zone. It's like, oh, they have 52. Well, that's interesting because I picked them to score 52. So that was cool. Like, I did nail that. But Akron had already had that second field goal that nobody at the Woody was excited about. Nobody in the Horseshoe was happy about, especially those defensive guys who, worked for a shutout and gave up a shutout in the first drive of the year, I think. I say it on our Friday video. Make sure to go check that out. I'm going to do it. And it's going to backfire. I know it's going to backfire. But they haven't had a shutout since 2019 when they beat Cincinnati 42-0 in a game that was just a disaster for Cincinnati. I think it is extremely, extremely difficult for a team of Western Michigan's caliber to play against the second straight Big Ten team, the physicality that you need to do that, especially when the more physical team is the second one you see, because you think that you got the physicality in Madison, and it was nothing compared to what they're going to see on Saturday night. Plus, it's a primetime game. Like, Ohio State's going to be amped up, even though the opponent doesn't look like the sexiest opponent. I'm going to go 59-0. And I just think that this offense is going to put on a show, and the defense is going to make sure that some special stuff happens. And the second team defense is going to take just as much pride in keeping that shutout as the first team defense. Nobody wants to be the guy on the second team or third team defense. You're sitting in film like, hey, you're the only one that gave up this score, pal. Like, you cost us the shutout.
Yeah.
So I think that is where I'm leaning here. I'd like to see, the MAC do well, but they can do well in October and November. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's going to be a cool opportunity for a lot of these guys to get under the lights of the shoe. Like that's another thing that you get that early in the season. It's still going to be pretty warm out, which I think, I mean, I did look at the weather. It's going to be kind of cold. Well, hey, that's another thing. It's a taste of what the season's going to be like later in the year. So, but anyway, regardless, primetime game in the Horseshoe for some of those young guys, I think that's a cool opportunity, especially because they'll get to play. I know that last year they played Michigan State at night in November, and like that was also a cool opportunity aside from the weather. But like you do get an opportunity to play as a young player, at night, and I think that's a huge deal for these guys. It's part of the reason why you come to Ohio State is for those primetime opportunities, and so that is something that's cool if you're looking to go to the game. Like you get to see that. I think that's always neat. They do like a little bit of a light show. I remember Travion Henderson scored a touchdown that game against Michigan State right before or right after they did the whole light show with all the phones and the flashlights. Like that was cool. So you get some cool moments like that.
Game time temperature looks like between 64 and 61. Because at 7, it says it's going to be 64. At 8, it says it's going to be 61. The wind is kind of going to be whipping 8 to 18 mile an hour. Wind at 8 mile an hour, gusts of 18. I'm not a weatherman. I don't ask to be, but they're wrong a lot. So I can say the weather and be wrong, and I'm okay with it. It's going to be in the low 60s. By the end of the game, it's going to be 54 degrees. It's going to truly feel like fall. Grab that pumpkin spice latte, grab that pumpkin cream, whatever you're into, and get to the Horseshoe. The tailgating is going to be a blast because during the day it's going to be like mid 60s. Like that is, you want to see football season in Columbus, Ohio, like perfect. Like give me all of that. I'm a 65 degrees, 60 degrees, and a little bit of sun is like my wheelhouse. So, let's get it. I'm so excited for Saturday because again, like the tailgating is going to be awesome. When I'm walking into the stadium, if you see us walking into the stadium, come say hi to Lettermen Row. It's just going to be fantastic. Like it's the perfect fall weather day. And we get to sit on the couch and watch Michigan, Texas to start the day and to end the day in the Horseshoe, seeing the dotting of the I as the sun's starting to go down. Oh man, like yes, just yes.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's going to be awesome. It does feel like fall starting to get to that point. Last week was really hot. There was a lot of hot days, but I'm ready for the cooler temperature for sure. Should we get into the rest of the slate? You kind of hinted at it with that Michigan-Texas game. Should we get into it?
Dude, this slate for Saturday, week 2, loaded. Like you're not going to see a bunch of ranked on ranked. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be have ranked on rank, especially this early in the year when we're still trying to figure out which teams are good, which teams aren't. Like the AP voters, they do a good job because they have to balance so many things. Like they're watching their own team that they cover and then also ranking these teams. But like nobody really knows right now. We all thought Florida State was a top 10 team. They suck. They're terrible. So like we just don't know. So the headliner is obviously Texas at Michigan. And like next year, on August 30th, we get Texas at Ohio State. That's going to be an absolute banger. But for now, we get the banger between Texas and Michigan, and we're going to find out a lot about both of these teams. I thought Michigan was repulsive on offense last week. I thought Texas just made it look very easy against Colorado State, obviously overmatched. But this is the big game. Like this is one that you've had circled all offseason. I'm excited. We're going to go rapid fire, but we'll start there. Who you got?
Texas, and I actually don't think it's going to be close. But, with this Michigan defense, like they might prevent it from being a blowout. I just don't see how the offense can keep up at all. Like I don't. I know it was Colorado State, but this Texas offense feels pretty well oiled at this point. And, Davis Warren's going to have to play the game of his life to be able to make this a game, I think. And maybe he will, but I'm going Texas big.
I'm very, very, very intrigued by Michigan's second cornerback and Michigan's safeties. They lost a safety for the year due to a torn ACL. Will Johnson's obviously fantastic, but Sark is a wizard, man. And he's going to get matchups for Isaiah Bond and a couple of those other receivers to where, like, it's not going to be Will Johnson on Isaiah Bond. And like, how does the Michigan corners hold up? Because it is a good precursor for how does Michigan try to defend the Ohio State passing attack because Will Johnson's only one man. Is he on Jeremiah Smith? Is he on Carnell Tate? We'll find a little bit about that this week, and I think Wink Martindale will blitz Texas a little bit. How does Quinn Ewers handle that pressure? Because then we'll get a sense of where they're at for the SEC slate. But I'm going Texas. I think it's going to be close for like 3 quarters, but I could see Texas making it a 2-score game in the 4th quarter and just wearing down the Michigan defense that I think is one of the elite units in the country. But like, man, like asking them to do all of that against an opponent like Texas and a schemer and a game planner like Sark, I just think that's a bridge too far for me, even on the road. I like Texas. All right. The second biggest matchup of the day, absolute banger. Got BC Duquesne, Andy. A big win. I'm going to let you be on your high horse for a second. How excited were you? We won't take too much time on BC Duquesne. We got a lot of games to pick. I got a full note card here, but BC Duquesne, like, are you excited to see the follow-up performance?
The only thing I'm excited for really is because this is not a great matchup at all. Like, they should win by 40 to 50 points. I'm really excited to see it's a home game, and BC does this thing. It's called like the Superfan shirt. It's bright yellow, and they've really done a bad job the last like 10 years of getting students to actually wear that shirt because it's kind of ugly, but like it does create a cool picture of like a full yellow crowd of all the students. They haven't achieved that for years. They want to get that done with the Bill O'Brien era, getting the ranked win week 1, beating Florida State, having all the momentum coming back to Chestnut Hill. It would be cool if they actually do that now, and that would be like the buy-in for this program, especially a year where the Patriots might be bad again. This is what BC needs to be relevant in Massachusetts. Like, they need the Patriots to be bad, and they need to be really darn good. And so far, like, that might be happening.
And are the Red Sox going to make the postseason? We don't know. So, the floor may be yours, Bill O'Brien.
You need all of that because it's a pro sports city. You literally need the pro sports to be bad, and you need BC to be, like, really, really good.
All right, that is enough BC Duquesne talk. Iowa State, Iowa. Who you got?
Oof. Yeah, Iowa. Look, I think I'm kind of high on Iowa just because I think this defense is so ridiculously legit. It has been for years, and I think that game against Ohio State coming up is going to be really intriguing. That's going to be a test before the test.
I agree.
Pre-test, if you will. So I'm going Iowa.
A pre-test, if you will. Yeah, there you go. I'm going Iowa as well. Kirk doesn't lose to Iowa State very often. So it's also his first game because he was suspended last week because he actually owned up to some mistakes he made in the NCAA process. It's funny when you do that, how things work out. But that's neither here nor there. Back to Michigan, Texas, I guess. Arkansas, Oklahoma State in Stillwater.
Yeah. Isn't Alex Bowman like 25 years old?
Sure. Yeah, he's old. He might be as old as like the Aussie punters that are around the country that are like 28.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going – you know what? Let's roll the dice. Let's go Arkansas. Arkansas.
I picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. If they lose to Arkansas, I'm going to be in shambles because I already picked Florida State to win the ACC. That's not happening. So Oklahoma State.
Arkansas scored 10 touchdowns on their 10 drives, and they're the first team in the FBS to do that in 20 years.
Yeah, well.
They're also playing Arkansas Pine Bluff, but,
We're putting an APB out for APB's defense.
Yeah.
If you get that, you might be a cop. Georgia Tech, Syracuse. Kyle McCord against a pretty good Georgia Tech defense that is pretty feisty. Their new defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci, I think. Really good defensive mind. Probably going to be a head coach here soon against Kyle McCord. Kyle had a really good game on Saturday. We're big fans of Kyle McCord as the person. So we'll root for Kyle. Who you got?
The Fighting McCords. I don't know. Yeah, I'll go Syracuse. I think Georgia Tech is good. I think they're a good ACC team, which is good for the league. They haven't been that way for a while. I'm just gonna keep rolling with Syracuse, though.
I'll go Tech. I think they're better than people thought they would be going into the year. I liked their physicality against Florida State, and then I also liked that they were able to follow it up and get a win against Georgia State and actually control that game rather than kind of slouch through it in week 2. We got a lot to get to. We're going to be really quick here. Cal Auburn on the Plains.
I'm going Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn. Keon Grays against Caleb Burton. The battle of former Ohio State wide receivers in the class of 2022. Yeah. Colorado, Nebraska. It's crazy that, if you went back in time to like 1997 and told people that we were picking Colorado and Nebraska behind Cal Auburn, and neither of these teams were in the same league anymore, I think people would like tell you to get bent. But now, that's just life in college football. Colorado, Nebraska, Dion versus Matt Rule, Act 2. Last year, Colorado won. Now it's Dylan Raiola versus Shadur. Kind of a cool quarterback matchup.
Yeah.
Who you got?
Yeah, non-zero chance that Nebraska starts 7-0. That keeps rolling for me. I'm going Nebraska.
I'm going Nebraska as well. I think a little bit of a Dylan Raiola coming out party, but also Colorado's defense, I think, is pretty bad because they trust Shiloh Sanders to do things that Deion Sanders could do, and Shiloh's not very good. So I think Nebraska's going to have a good time, picking apart that Colorado secondary. Boise, Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon. I do think they'll bounce back a little bit. I'm still a little bit worried about that offensive line, but yeah, Oregon.
Yeah, not great. You see the Ohio State defensive line, and you start to wonder. It just has my attention. I'm not saying anything. It just has my attention. Like, this Oregon offensive line was supposed to be good. Let's see it against Boise. Boise ran the out of the ball against Georgia Southern last week. 6 touchdowns for Ashton Genty.
Yeah.
If he has another game like that against this Oregon defense, then you're talking New York already. So, we'll see. App Clemson. Dude, Clemson is.
I don't know. I mean, I picked Clemson to make the college football playoff and win the ACC, so I'm going Clemson. I think that the Georgia game, they played, their defense is still pretty darn good. That defensive line is good. That was a close game for a while. The score is a little bit misleading. But Cade Klubnik, man, it's got to be better. I'm going Clemson.
I'm going Clemson as well, but I think it's close. I don't think that this is going to be a get-right game for Clemson. You can't just crack your neck against the Mountaineers. You're going to have to fight tooth and nail and get off the mat. This is a get off the mat game for Clemson. You've got to get up for this one because App is going to come in ready to win. App beat A&M at A&M last year at Kyle Field in front of 100,000 people, and they don't care where they play. They don't care about Howard's Rock. They don't care about Dabo. They don't care that you didn't take him in the transfer portal. I'm curious, very, very curious, because I don't think Cade Klubnik is that good. But I do think Clemson's going to find a way to win, but I think it's going to be close, and you're going to be sweating that one, so it's interesting. Kansas State Tulane in the return game. Kansas State lost to Tulane and then won the Big 12 in 2022, just like the weirdest thing ever. Tulane was pretty good that year, but now they play again.
Yeah, Kansas State. I actually really like Kansas State this year. They're my Big 12 pick, so Kansas State.
I think this game is going to be really close. I think it's going to be very interesting. Avery Johnson didn't look that great on Saturday. We'll see if he improves. The biggest improvement is from week 1 to week 2, as Chip Kelly said. So I think Kansas State's going to win. I think it's going to be close. And then the last game, you got to get out there. 6 p.m. Don't know where don't know, what channel it's going to be on, but everybody's going to have their eyes on South Alabama at Ohio. A good G5 matchup, like 2 perennial Group of 5 bowl teams. I think it is so fun when these teams go out of conference and schedule these type of games. Ohio's going to win.
I have literally no information on this game, but I'm going to go with the Bobcats because,
that's right. Ohio. I picked BC to beat Duquesne. You have to pick Ohio to beat South.
Yeah. Well, you'd be a real sicko to pick Duquesne's.
Absolutely. This, though, is an Ohio State program. This is Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. Thank the people at Wendy's, as always, for their loyal support of this program. Andy Backstrom on the other side of your screen. You will see him in the horseshoe on Saturday night for Ohio State, Western Michigan, and me as well with the 41-year vet Tim May. Matt Parker's going to be on the sidelines doing all things photography and recruiting. The whole Lettermen Row crew. We're going to roll out the red carpet, get into the horseshoe, watch Ohio State, Western Michigan, have full breakdowns on lettermenrow.com. Go there right now, get a membership. We would love to see you in the Lettermen Lounge message board. We'll see you guys in the horseshoe, and we'll see you back here on the YouTube channel. We'll break it all down after Ohio State plays Western Michigan.